Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina, and I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar, Demystifying Single Touch Payroll, which will be presented by Pam Chilman from AMC Training Centre on behalf of MYOB. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Pam will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll pass it over to Pam to get things started. Thanks, Pam.
Great, thank you, Tina, and thanks very much to Connecting Up and MYOB for providing the opportunity for me to present to you. In fact, present to you again. I think it's about 12-18 months since I last delivered a session on single touch payroll for Connecting Up. So it's great to be back and to present to a sector of the market that I'm particularly passionate about. There is a bit of background about myself up on the slides. Hopefully you can now all see my screens okay. And I guess just a bit of background about me, having worked as an MYOB certified consultant for many years now. I'm passionate about helping businesses and various organisations of all sizes find efficiencies using their accounting software to make sure they get the most out of the product to do what you are passionate about doing in your sector. But really, it's not about me. Let's talk about what's happening today in our session that we've got. We've got lots of content to cover. We will go through a few slides to start with, and then we'll go through and have a look at our actual MYOB software. So lots to cover, and certainly, as Tina said, there will be a chance to have an opportunity to ask some questions later on. But Tina, can we have bring the poll up first, please? I'd just like to, before we start, understand where your organisation is up to before we deliver our session today on single touch payroll. To understand where you are in knowing about single touch payroll, and also so I can tailor the session a little bit to yourself. So hopefully you can all see some questions just asking you where you're up to in your journey with single touch payroll. So Tina, have we got our poll up at the moment?
Yes, we do. We're just collecting some responses at the moment. I'll just give it another 5 to 10 seconds and then I'll close the polls.
Sure. I understand we have quite a few people on today, Tina. It's great to see that everybody is starting to be engaged with single touch payroll. I've noticed in talking to various businesses around and organisations around Australia that they're now starting to think about what they need to be doing or realising that it may involve them and it didn't before. So it's great that you're on board today.
Okay, so the results are out. We have 6% no idea, 38% heard of it but not started setting up, 26% are starting to get ready, 17% are nearly there, and 13% are ready and feeling confident.
Excellent, fantastic. So we do have quite a range of people on today. So I'm going to cover some foundations and I'll talk right through in getting started. So let's actually look at our agenda today. We're talking about what it is. Let's talk about how to get you ready and what it looks like day to day up and running. And also for those of you who may already be working in single touch payroll, because I know some of you may already be reporting, what the end of year process looks like, because that will have changed a little bit. So as I said, I'll go through a few slides and then we'll actually have a look inside the software and also cover off on a number of topics today, including what is single touch payroll, or another acronym. I'm actually based in ACT and we love acronyms here. STP is a new one, single touch payroll reporting. So what is it? What it means for employers, so if you're the payroll officer or the employer, what to tell your employees, and what you actually need to do to get set up to start before you can do the reporting, so because there are a few setup processes to go through. So in summary, when you do a pay run as the employer, you will pay your staff as normal. There is no change to the way you pay your staff. In fact, there's no changes to sending off a pay slip for your staff at the same time. So there is no change in this process. What is new however, is with single touch payroll reporting, as part of your pay run process, this information will be sent to the ATO every time you record a pay from within your software. Year-to-date amounts are sent to the ATO in the sections of salary and wages, tax withheld, and super guarantee liability. At the same time, the employee information also gets updated in their MyGov accounts for the employee. And the MyGov accounts will populate their totals each pay run when you're doing this reporting. And because the information is populated in their MyGov accounts, the payment summaries are actually going to become a thing of the past. In fact, payment summaries used to be called group certificates. So if you've just gotten used to calling them payment summaries, they're in fact going to be a thing of the past once you're reporting with single touch payroll. So this information at the end of the year as well, when the last pay run is completed, will also be populated into the tax returns for the employees to have their tax returns done by their tax agent or via MyTax, depending on how their tax returns are done. We're going to go into more detail, but that's in summary how the workflow is going to happen once you're reporting in single touch payroll. So where are we up to in the single touch payroll journey, as they call it? For a number of employers, they've already been reporting, or should have been reporting, from 1st of July 2018. And there was a fair bit of this in the media that those with a head count of 20 or more needed to start reporting back in July 18. But now the legislation has been passed, in fact in February of this year, 2019, that all businesses, those with one or more employees, so the 1 to 19 employee numbers, will also need to start reporting from 1 July 2000 this year. So not far to go. So as I said, well done on being here today so that you understand what is required. And the ATO does understand that mistakes can happen as we go through this change. And it can, for some, be a big change. In fact, for some who don't even have any payroll software that need to put some payroll software in place, it can actually take a little bit of time to get everything in place and to get it all right. So in the first 12 months of single touch payroll, the ATO is going to help working with employers to ensure that everything is right from a reporting perspective and not enforce any penalties. So let's talk about what it means for employers and also for employees. First of all, let's talk about it from an employer's perspective. From an employer's perspective, you'll still pay your employees, you'll still give them pay slips. That aspect has not changed at all, nor has the payment cycle of when you actually pay your PAYG and superannuation. Single touch payroll is all about reporting. It has no effect on the actual payment or the money cycle, which I'm sure many of you are pleased to hear, because the legislation was suggested originally that you would pay at the same time. You'll be pleased to know that it's only the reporting cycle that is affected. So you'll pay your staff the same way. You'll still pay your super in the same cycles, whether it's quarterly or monthly. You'll still pay your PAYG with the same cycles as well. But no longer will you need to provide payment summaries to your staff. But it also places the emphasis on getting it right throughout the year when you're doing your reporting, instead of, like for some of our clients, we assist them with some of those tricky entries at the end of the financial year just before we do the payment summaries. So it's going to move the emphasis from end of year reporting to each pay cycle reporting. So this means if you pay your staff weekly, the reporting needs to be done each week. If you pay your staff fortnightly, this reporting will need to be done fortnightly. And the reporting is sent to the ATO, as well as the super guarantee amounts. And in the past, these super guarantee amounts were not actually reported to the ATO. You would report that when you paid your super to the superannuation funds or a clearinghouse. So that's quite new, that each pay run you'll also be reporting your superannuation amounts of all types, super guarantee, along with salary sacrifice or other risk amounts. And in the future, as more of the functionality is built out with the ATO, onboarding your staff will become easier. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that you'll be able to onboard your staff easier with tax file declarations, superannuation standard choice forms, as well as some other documentation. So that's from an employer's perspective. From an employee perspective, there's going to be some changes that I would suggest you want to communicate to your employees ahead of time. Not only will they get paid the same old way and receive their pay slips, but I would start educating my staff to let them know that payment summaries will become a thing of the past. Because for them, for many people, including myself, I've been getting payment summaries for 20 years, and I'm going to wonder why I'm not getting one at the end of this financial year. So it might be a process to start thinking about educating your staff about this change of not receiving payment summaries, because the information that is being reported to the ATO each pay run will also be reported in their MyGov accounts to view their gross, their tax, and their superannuation amounts. How many of your employees do you think actually have MyGov accounts? I'd be interested to know. You might like to type some of these comments in the chat panel over on the right-hand side. In delivering these workshops over the last 12 months for many employers, in my experience, I've found that employers don't feel that many of their employees actually have MyGov accounts. Some will because they use the MyGov accounts to link to services like the ATO, to Centrelink, to child support, and the disability insurance scheme. So some will, but it might be a communication piece to tell your employees that they will need to, at the end of the year you start reporting for single touch payroll, to be accessing this information via their MyGov accounts. In fact, the ATO has produced a fact sheet called Information for Employees. In fact, I might just switch across to the ATO website. Just bear with me as I switch across. You should see my screen change colour. I'll just move from our website. Across the top, I can just open up here. There's some information about single touch payroll, in fact, a lot on the ATO's website. And if you do a search, and if you have any trouble, let me know. I can send you the link, or I can send Tina the link. There is actually a fact sheet called Single Touch Payroll for Employees and Employers. I would be downloading this fact sheet for employees. I'll just bring it up for you. Because it's on the ATO letterhead, it's I guess a credible source of information to give to your employees and lets them know about these changes that are being made. So that might be one of the first actions that come out of today's presentation, is actually to download that fact sheet and start communicating to your employees, particularly if you're already reporting with single touch payroll this year. As we know, it's taken some employees a little bit of time to get used to payment summaries from group certificates, and now that's changing again. The information is also going to be populated in the MyGov accounts so that the tax agents or the employee, if they use MyTax, it will pre-fill their earnings in for doing their tax returns as well. So download that fact sheet, and that might be something to communicate to your employees. Maybe when you send out that next pay slip, you can attach that document, or it might be something that you communicate that message to with your employees. It will be something they need to access. If they can't access that information and they really can't get MyGov accounts for whatever reasons, then the only way they will be able to get their payment summaries at the end of the year, or that total of earnings information, will be by ringing the ATO, because the information, you will no longer need to issue them payment summaries, and the information will be in the MyGov accounts. So that's what I'm finding is a lot of change for not only employers having to communicate the message, but employees who often don't have MyGov accounts to get that information and get that started in place, ready for that end of year reporting. So our next component is to talk about the compliance aspect and getting your software ready for single touch payroll reporting. In fact, before you start reporting, apart from downloading maybe the information sheet, the next most important task would be to look at doing a payroll health check that we would recommend, a bit of an audit, because this information that you're reporting to the ATO is coming directly from your software. Checking your employee details are up to date, making sure your payroll calculations are accurate, although I'm sure your employees would tell you otherwise. To clean up your payroll data, particularly if you've inherited MYOB from another previous bookkeeper and you've got a whole lot of lists of information. Reviewing your payroll processes to think about the timing of when you carry out your payroll processes, including how often you pay your staff, and whether you pay your staff cash or electronically, and whether you record the information at the time. But also to ensure that your PAYG and superannuation payments are all up to date, and that you do have processes in place to make sure they are paid on time, because with this data going across to the ATO, they're going to have more transparency about organisations that's PAYG and superannuation is not up to date. So let's have a look and see what we need to do to get ready. Now that we know what it is and when we're reporting, in other words, each pay run, what do we need to do to get ready? So depending on where you are in the stage of single touch payroll, I saw we had those different percentages of people at the different stage in the poll. Some of you will already be getting your single touch payroll software ready. Have you updated your fields? You will need to assign some ATO categories, and you will need to set an authority. So let's look at those 4 different aspects. The first aspect is to make sure you're using single touch payroll enabled software. Now, depending on which product you use in the small business range of MYOB will depend on what you need to action from today's session. Let's talk about Essentials. MYOB Essentials is the browser-based solution that MYOB has, ideal for organisations that use payroll, or maybe you're not using the payroll component, maybe you need to add the payroll component. But because Essentials is online, MYOB provides those updates automatically, and you will already have STP enabled software. You'll still have some setup to do, but the software is already enabled. MYOB Account Write. A lot of our clients use Account Write. So there have been up until now 2 different versions or 2 different streams of Account Write. The latest version of MYOB Account Write is 2019.2 as we are here today. The version 2018.4 or later was when the single touch payroll compliant version of Account Write became available. And sometimes there's a bit of confusion with the versions. Account Write, we now call the classic version, is the older version 19 Account Write version. An Account Write Classic, version 19 or maybe version 18 or 17, you may have been successfully using version 19, but it will not be updated to be single touch payroll compliant. MYOB have been very clear in their communications over the last few months, explaining that you will have the ability to upgrade from the classic version, so you don't have to start fresh. You simply need to be on a current version of MYOB by upgrading and upgrading to the 2019.2 as it is today. MYOB Account Edge, the 3rd product in the small business range, Account Edge works on the Macintosh platform. You may have a Mac and you have been using an earlier version. Version 18 has recently been released for Account Edge, and you will be able to update so that you are single touch payroll compliant in version 18. So do be aware that you will need single touch payroll enabled software. You may not even be using the payroll component. I know for some attendees who come along to the workshops, they've actually been using Account Right, but they actually haven't been using the payroll functionality. I'm wondering if anyone online today doesn't have any software in place and you're at the beginning of your STP or single touch payroll journey. The ATO has wanted to ensure that all businesses can have some software in place and have encouraged software vendors, including MYOB, to have a payroll-only option in place. So you'll see some information coming out from Connecting Up in the next day or two about those who may need to get something in place. And MYOB have released their MYOB Essentials Payroll Only. Now, it does only have payroll in it. Their Essentials Payroll Only solution that is cost effective and that does allow for reporting for 1 to 4 employees. It doesn't have the accounting functionality, but it does make you single touch payroll compliant, which is great to see. And I'd be interested to know if you're wanting to make some comments why you haven't upgraded from Classic, the 19 Account Right version, to the latest version. I know for some businesses that they have had to have a deferral in place because maybe like only recently Account Edge has been released, version 18, and for some using Account Right version 19, they may have been using advanced inventory functionality or foreign currency. Whereas now with version 2019.2, you have the ability to upgrade and add on that extra functionality. So that's great to see, and you have been covered by MYOB's deferral that they had in place on your behalf, and now we can all upgrade to the latest versions. There are some situations where you may be in remote areas. I know we've got people online today from all around Australia, which is great. I know that if you do have challenges with internet connections, although I guess on being online today, you have an internet connection, but for employers who run their business in an area with no internet service, they can seek exemptions, and you can talk to a BAS or tax agent. And I know we've been talking to some of our clients who, for whatever reason, may have trouble reporting, including those with a WPN because they're registered for PAYG and are not entitled to an ABN. They have an exemption from single touch payroll reporting for the next 12 months. So there are some exemptions, and you'll have my contact details later on if you're wanting some clarification about this, or we can answer those questions later on. But let's now talk about the data and the data fitting in with the ATO. The data is being sent via your software. So I want to be really clear about this. A lot of questions have come up in webinars I've run and workshops I've run about going online and uploading a file. You will not have the ability to log in figures via the ATO portal directly. Everybody will need to have some sort of payroll software in place to be able to do this reporting. The reporting comes directly from your payroll data, and this data must fit within the ATO reporting requirements. So all software providers, including MYOB, have had to make changes and updates to their software to meet these requirements. So there's 3 key areas I'd like to go through with you now to show you the 3 areas for you to work on to ensure that you're up to date and ready for those who are not yet in the process of being ready, or for those that just want to do a bit of a cross-check to make sure that everything's all in place. So the first 2 areas are company information and your employee details. Now, MYOB does have a validation tool that I will show you that helps with checking that the data is ready. And until your data is validated through this tool, you'll not be able to connect to the ATO and carry out your reporting. So let's look at what we need to do. And isn't it great you've still got a few weeks to get this information ready and in place? So the first area is your company information. Fairly straightforward. You probably have all this information already inside your MYOB set of data. I am going to use Account Right for our presentation today, but the functionality is similar in the Essentials and the Account Edge product. Information such as your ABN, your address, your state and your postcode, but I would still be checking that this information is correct and up to date, as well as the second area of employee details. Now, the employee details, some of you might be saying, well, why would my employee details not be up to date? Well, remembering it's also superannuation that's being reported as well, and sometimes we find some of this information is being stored outside of MYOB. So let's jump in and let's have a look at what we need to be looking at as I switch across, and hopefully you can see my screen change to MYOB. So this is the latest version of Account Right, and this is version 2019.2. And if you ever need to check what version you're running, up in your help menu up the top of the screen under About MYOB Account Right, you can see here the version showing 2019.2. So if your MYOB doesn't look quite like this, you may not, and sorry, this is the PC version, the Account Right version. You may be using Essentials or you may be using Edge, but if you're using the classic version, it will look a bit different. So those two key areas that we started with up in your setup menu, under your company information in that menu, if you go in and just check to make sure that your company information details along with your address, phone number, email address and your ABN are all current. The next area to validate and make sure it's okay is in your card file for your employees. If you move into the cards list, I'm sure many of you who are the payroll officers on board today will be very familiar with setting up your employees. But let's have a look and see what Mary Jones has got set up in her card file. In my slide earlier, I mentioned that you need to make sure that all the address details are all valid and correct. I'm sure they are if you've been doing payment summaries from MYOB in the past few years. But of course, we set up employees throughout the year. So do take care when you're onboarding your staff to ensure that you do have all this information. And it does put more emphasis on getting all this information more quickly for some, as you are going to be reporting this data to the ATO each pay run. You will need a phone number in here, and you will need an email address for your employees. And you will need to move across and ensure under your payroll details tab that your date of birth is correct for those employees, as well as the start date for your employees. I would be checking to see that they've got valid tax file numbers in here, because sometimes they get left if employees are not so quick in getting us that information until some weeks later. But as I said, you will not be able to do your single touch payroll reporting unless you capture this information prior to doing your pay runs. MYOB will allow you to pay your staff, but you won't be able to do your single touch payroll reporting. But it's also a good time to be checking that all this information that you set up for your employees is up to date and correct. And sometimes that can take a little bit of time to do. If you do have a large list of employees, obviously that could take some time. Remembering with MYOB, you do have the ability to export data and take it out into an Excel format. And you may find that's easier to have a look at your employee cards to look at the information in one Excel sheet rather than going into each card individually, particularly if you've got over 100 employees sitting in here. Let's go back to our slides and have a look at our next area. So that's the first two areas, the company information and your employee card information. The third key area to carry out in your payroll health check is in relation to your payroll categories. Now, up until now, payment summaries would be where we would define where those payroll categories would appear on the payment summaries. So we would carry out this process, and we have continue to, for those not yet reporting with single touch payroll. We go into the payment summaries area. We define which of our payroll categories, so our category list could potentially be this list on the right, and the fields that print on the payment summaries are in this middle panel. But we only look at this normally once a year, coming up in June and July. Now with single touch payroll, we need to put this assignment in a different area. So the payment summary area will become completely redundant. And now inside our payroll categories list, in the latest versions of MYOB, you will need to assign the payroll category to the ATO reporting category before your first pay run that you report with Single Touch Payroll. So if you're going to be reporting with STP on, say, the 3rd of July, you'll need to carry out this setup process before the 3rd of July. Each of your payroll categories will need to be assigned. Let's have a look at what has been the ATO payment summary fields in a box now over on the left-hand side. Now, I know there's lots of boxes in here. On the right-hand side are the new ATO reporting categories under Single Touch Payroll. And in fact, you'll find they're fairly similar. Gross payments are still gross payments, but probably the main difference that we have experienced is that in the past with payment summaries, we would define what the allowance name is, and we would type them in and match them up to 9 allowances. Whereas now the allowance titles are predefined with the ATO. You've got your lump sum payments as we had in the past, workplace giving, your deductions have actually been put into one section, not 3, and so on and so on. So the main difference really you'll find is to do with the allowances box. But you will still need to allocate each of these categories, and you will need to define them in this new area of the payroll categories, including for your superannuation, because the superannuation is being reported as well and was not previously reported in the past. So let's switch into MYOB again. Bear with me as I switch across. You should see my screen change back into in fact, I'm simply using Clearwater if you're wanting to have a look at this if you're watching this as a recording, or if you're wanting to have a look at this in advance. So I'm now going to go into the payroll area, and I'm going to have a look at my payroll categories. Over on the left-hand side, I can see now I've got this extra column here called ATO reporting categories. Now, if I go into one of those categories, they all start with being to be assigned. And then we now have a new grouping list of ATO reporting categories that these categories need to be assigned to. So base salary is fairly obvious, gross payments. I simply select the reporting category, select OK, and go through and work through all my other payroll categories. Now, each of these categories will need to be defined, even if they're not being used. If I have a look at an allowance that I've got and go into meal allowance, notice up the top here, I actually have my allowances predefined. There's one actually here called allowance meals. So you will work through this list, and this list may be quite long. I know working with a lot of the not-for-profits, a lot of these categories are actually, lists are very long. Each category will need to be defined. And if it's not to be reported, if it's, say, a reimbursement, for example, or something historical that you're no longer using, then put in there that it's not to be reported. Once you've done your wages group, you'll move across to the superannuation group. You'll go into each of these, and you'll define these as being an ATO reporting category as well. And generally, because of the contribution type, MYOB has been quite smart in this area by suggesting to you that that is a super guarantee. I know many of you have salary sacrifice, both in superannuation and your deductions. So MYOB has given the options based on how these contribution types have been set up. So this is where your payroll health check comes in to ensure these categories have been set up correctly. Again, working through all of these, ensuring they're correct. Entitlements are not valid because they're simply a bank of hours. You'll need to assign your deductions as well. Now, it may look a bit confusing in here in the salary sacrificed area for those who are already partway through. In the reporting category for your salary sacrifice, it doesn't really matter what you select in here. Now, I know this is going to sound a bit strange, but if your salary sacrifice categories are set up as being exempt from tax, which is logical, they will be sacrificed before employees are taxed, then because of the way in which they are set up with this exempt box, as long as they have a classification in here, even if it says not reportable, and I will just switch to my slides, even if you set them up in as not reportable, MYOB has been smart in this area, saying that they are automatically reduced for the salary sacrifice super and the pre-tax deductions, they'll automatically reduce the gross payments amount, because MYOB is saying that because they are exempt from tax, they need to reduce the gross payments. So I know that has caught a few clients out in that particular area with the settings, but be aware that that is how it will work. Also be aware, having worked with a number of clients in the wages area, if you exempt a category from tax, it won't go through to the reporting. So do watch how you set these up, and also go right through, ensure that all of these are set up, including your taxes. Define that as being PAYG, as being your tax. So this is an area that you will want to spend a little bit of time in by defining your categories, your pay categories, to ensure all of them are set up. You can sort the columns across the headings here to see where you're up to by name or by type, but ensuring all of these have been classified. Let's switch back to our slides. So do have a look at how your categories have been set up. Now, MYOB does have a nice little validation tool to make sure that you are ready with your reporting. So this validation tool will check to see that the information for your employees is all in the right format, ready to report. So back in MYOB, sorry to be switching backwards and forwards, but it's best to show you, I think. So if I go back into MYOB's Payroll Command Centre, there's a new section, or a relatively new section, called Payroll Reporting. When I first come into this area, the Check Payroll Details section is the validation tool. When I click on Check Payroll Details, it will take a moment to run through. It looks at my company information. It looks at my employee cards. I can see already Alan Long's tax file number is invalid, so I have to address that. And that third section we looked at, the payroll categories, it will go through and check that my payroll categories have had an ATO reporting category assigned. So we want this to be clear, as in have no errors in here. We will not be able to connect to the ATO until this section is all cleared. When that section is cleared and we get a nice tick to say, yep, everything is all ready to go, we then need to connect to the ATO. And we'll go into this second section called Connect to ATO. So it will go through the prompts, and let me go back to my slides to show you the process. And we do need to set up this connection process because we need to define the authority with the ATO. Because before Single Touch Payroll, once a year when payment summaries were lodged to the ATO, you would declare that information was true and correct by putting the payroll officer or the manager's name at the bottom of the payment summaries as part of doing the payment summary process. Now we need to set the authority with the ATO because every pay run we're declaring, or the payroll officer is declaring, that this information is correct every time we process the pay. So we need to set the authority. In order to do that, we need to have some information on hand, information you're likely to have, like your ABN and contact details, but also your login details to your my.myob account. When you select that section I showed you before in that payroll reporting area, you will go through and nominate MYOB as your software provider. And that's so that the ATO knows which software you're going to get the reporting through so that the connectivity services work correctly in the background. If you're going to have multiple people doing payroll at some point in time during the year, you will need to go through this process and nominate each of the authorisers. There are two ways for you to carry out this set as authority process. And this is all carried out within inside MYOB in that payroll reporting section that I took you through before. And you will be able to either call the ATO using the phone number shown on the screen. And this phone number is inside, so you don't need to write this down, but this phone number is inside that Connect to ATO process. And that's useful if you don't have an Oz key. In other words, you don't have access to the ATO portal as the business portal or a BAS or tax agent if you're wearing that hat today. So you will be able to phone the ATO to provide this connection service. Alternatively, if you are already connecting to the ATO and you do have an AusKey using that service, then you can log in using the connection service via ATO's Access Manager, which is a section from within the ATO portal. Once you go through that connection process, you'll click Save to complete the setup, and that is all through the prompts within the software in that payroll reporting section in the Payroll Command Centre. The Access Manager is inside of MYOB. The Access Manager is inside of the business portal, accessed via MYOB through that Connect to ATO process inside the Payroll Command Centre. The business portal, if you haven't used it before, is where you can lodge your business activity statements, update your business details, but it's the Access Manager section that connects using the ATO online services. But you're probably wondering, once you connect to the ATO, what are we actually reporting? Let's look at this up and running process and see what it looks like day to day. What I've shown you up until now is all the getting ready process. All of what I've shown you is all to do with the initial setup and only has to be carried out. So once you're up and running, let's have a look at the process of day to day with Single Touch Payroll and also potentially of correcting mistakes and things that you need to know. So what does your payday look like at the moment? As we sit here now, if you're not already reporting with Single Touch Payroll, what does the process look like? Well, it probably looks like something like going into the process payroll screen, editing the pay period, checking the amounts are correct for each employee, and clicking on that record button, emailing the pay slips, transferring the funds. Maybe you create the ABA file from MYOB, or you may go into the internet and key that amount in. And that process is all carried out from within MYOB. If so, then once you've connected to the ATO through the process we just showed you, the only difference will be one more step that you need to carry out is that when you click on the record button, there will be a declaration box automatically appear to say, I declare this information transmitted in this payroll report is true and correct. So you will then, as the authorised sender, type in your name, click on send, and then your payroll reporting information will be reported to the ATO. There's no ABA files to upload to the ATO or the equivalent of. There's no EMP-DUPE files to upload to the ATO as we've done in the past. It's a connection process directly from your software through to the ATO portals from that connection setup that we did a moment ago. So there's one small step that we need to carry out. So just reminding us, just switching back into MYOB, once you've connected to the ATO, you'll process your pays as normal. You'll go in your normal screens, define your cycle of when you're paying your staff. All of this will remain the same. You'll go into the next screen, edit the paychecks as you would normally do, and at this point down the bottom right of clicking on record, that's when you'll get the declaration process come up. So hopefully that's eased your mind, that it's not too onerous. There is a bit of setup to do, but once you carry out that setup, it really is literally a click of a couple more buttons. A couple of questions have arisen in the past. If you need somebody else to do that reporting, and maybe you don't finalise it all in the one steps, you start the process and somebody else does the completing of the file, or there's different stages you might go through. In Account Right, there is the ability to save and close if you're not ready to report and send to the ATO, where you can keep that information inside payroll and you can come back in here, complete your pay run, and then do your reporting. Alternatively, back in that payroll reporting section, you can also submit your reports to the ATO if you've closed out of that screen. And the same concept works in MYOB Essentials as well. Your software is the source of the truth, so it does put more emphasis, as you can see, on your software being correct. Keeping in mind that the reporting that goes through is year-to-date totals only. Gross wages, total tax, total super. Week 1, $1,000. Week 2, when you report, same amount. will update the year-to-date totals as $2,000. So year-to-date is what's being reported each pay run. So it does put the emphasis back on fixing mistakes throughout the year. And the ATO in the legislation has actually defined that you are required, once you have found that mistake, to report within 14 days or your next pay cycle. So do take care and delete those mistakes as you discover them. If you have maybe paid them online and you haven't actually put that information in correctly and you're not doing it directly from your MYOB and your ABA files. But just be aware that you can delete transactions, you can reverse transactions, but be aware that the adjustment pay runs do send year-to-date totals in there. So if you do a correction, so you can do negative pay runs now in Account Right. But be aware that deleting and reversing an entry doesn't send year-to-date totals. It's not until you update the figures by sending the next corrected pay run through and getting those updated year-to-date totals. So keep in mind that the information can go up in a payroll and the information can go down, but be aware your overall year-to-date totals cannot go to negative, of course, for their year-to-date for the employee. It's year-to-date totals that are being reported, and in fact, some businesses are opting in now and want to be into single touch payroll before the end of this year because they don't want to have to issue payment summaries, so their year-to-date totals will actually be updated. So maybe that's something to think about. Maybe you're going to opt in early and report year-to-date, because year-to-date totals are what are being sent through to the ATO. MYOB will be continuing to update the software. ETPs, if you're doing eligible termination payments, there will be some functionality added very soon, including in Essentials, so that you are updating those year-to-date totals for those employees. There is a new section called the reporting section, which is updated once you connect to the ATO, where you can notify if a staff member has been terminated. So let's talk about that end of year process, terminating staff and those sorts of year-end adjustments. And let's go through this next process at end of the year. So end of year is going to look a little bit different this year if you are already in single touch payroll. And I do encourage you to think about opting in early for single touch payroll. I heard some statistics when I was talking to some staff from the ATO in the last few days. I believe there's already 100,000 employers already reporting with single touch payroll. And I believe there are over 750,000 businesses that the ATO expects to be reporting in single touch payroll. So we're encouraging our clients to actually opt in early because we know it's going to be very busy leading up to the 30th of June and the beginning of July, with a lot of people wanting to connect and get started with single touch payroll. So that might be something to think about from today. But let's look at our final declaration process. So you will record their final pay. Now the ATO actually needs to know, as well as their tax agent needs to know, that it is their final pay. The trigger in the past has been their payment summary. There will still need to be your normal end of year process of balancing, and in fact throughout the year you should still be carrying out your normal end of month, end of quarter balancing processes. There will now be a process to go through to the online payroll reporting centre and make the final declaration. Now, because of confidentiality of data, I can show you a mock-up of what it looks like. And let me just magnify this screen a little bit for you. This is what the payroll reporting centre will look like after you've connected in that validation tool area. And you'll see 4 sections to carry out that end of year finalisation process. And this is where you'll tick a box to say, yes, I've finalised all my pays for my staff. In fact, you can do this one by one if you need to, but generally at the end of the year, you'll tick the box. And also you'll declare that the information transmitted for the final pay is true and correct. So again, you get that declaration process as well. So that finalises the process for the end of the year. You will get a report that you can look at the same time. It's also where, of course, you will want to able to report your reportable fringe benefits amounts, your RFBA amounts. So it will be where you key in those amounts. In fact, I probably should have had this slide earlier, because you'll put in your reportable FBT amounts first for each employee if it's relevant. Over on the right-hand side, there's some dots where you can click on and add those amounts as the grossed up values, similar to what you did in the past, but remember the payment summary section is going to become redundant. So it's a bit of a change in some respects from previous years, but in some respects it's still the same. You'll set that as final. That information will be populated into the MyGov accounts for the employees, into the My Tax areas for the tax agents to do their tax returns. But it is a bit of a change of mindset, because it's like, I think of it as being like doing a payment summary each pay run. So it really does need to be right, because it's being populated throughout the year. But for many who are used to maybe engaging with someone externally to do their payment summaries at the end of the year, it's worth thinking about what the changes to your workflows will be, as you are now with Single Touch Payroll. Once you have either opted in early or started reporting in the required 1 July 2019 timeframe, you would have reported just once at the end of the year. So a bit of a change of mindset for us. You will still, for those who are using Account Right, you'll still need to install the compliance update as in the past, but it's automatically done for MYB Essentials users. You'll still close off the payroll year end for Account Right, and you'll still load the new tax tables. So some parts are the same and that we've been used to in the past. Some processes are a little bit different. And I think most of it is a bit of a change of mindset for both the employers as well as the employees. So it's probably about this point in time we need to start thinking about how we feel about single touch payroll. Are we ready or not? It might be a good time, now that you've seen our presentation, to start thinking about how do you feel about being single touch payroll ready? And maybe the first step is to upgrade to the latest version through Connecting Up, or maybe to get some software in place. Connecting Up and MYOB together offer 30% off the RRP. And remember, there's also that Account Right or Essentials or Account Edge solution, and there is also the $10 solution. But if we can jump into our poll, let's have a look and see how we're feeling now about single touch payroll. Hopefully, it's a bit risky, isn't it, asking you how you feel right now. How do you feel now about getting ready and being in the reporting? So if we can open that poll, Tina.
Yep, poll has just launched, so I'll give everybody about 10 to 15 seconds.
So I believe you can log in on the Connecting Up website using your normal login details. There is a section that you can go to under the to access your discounts, donations and training and all the other aspects. If you head to the software section within the portal and find MYOB in the list, you can purchase the software if you don't already have the software in there, or find out some more information. Be aware that the MYOB Essentials special payroll only product doesn't have the 30% off, because it is only $10 per month and it is already discounted, but I'll have some contact details for you in the last slide if you've got any questions about your subscription side of things as well.
Thanks, Pam. I've closed the poll. Can you see the results? I've just shared them on the screen.
I can't see the screen. If you can let me know the results, that'd be great.
Sure. So 13% likely will need more help. 1% will outsource. 24% need to upgrade, then can set up. 40% are ready to get started to set up, and 22% are feeling confident and ready.
Well, hopefully those statistics are a bit higher than earlier on. Thanks, Tina. And some other resources for you, if we just move on to a couple more slides. AMC Training Centre have actually put together a bit of a single touch payroll guide on our website. It is at a high level of, particularly if you've got to communicate to somebody in your organisation that doesn't believe single touch payroll is coming in. One of the ladies in our office who's been contacting our clients has had a few comments from clients saying they didn't think it applied to them because they had 20 or more employees. So if you're needing to communicate this information to others, you're welcome to download our free guide to give you a bit of details about who it applies to. And it is important to think about what are the next steps for you from here. I think it's really important to get that payroll health check in place. In fact, we offer a payroll health check service. We're more than happy to assist with that service. AMC Training Centre, even though we're based here in ACT, we work nationally with clients. We have helped clients, large clients in Sydney, Brisbane, for example, in the not-for-profit sector with over 100 employees. We've converted their data from another accounting system to MYOB, integrated with timesheet rostering solutions, got them in place with various training for their staff, and worked with them extensively online for a cost-effective solution. So if that's something that you feel you would like some assistance with, I know a few people mentioned that they felt they would not like a little bit more assistance, please engage with us. We've got a number of staff here that we can work with you. If you're based in ACT, you might like to attend one of our sessions. We run MYB courses here. We run single touch payroll workshops face-to-face, and we also are going to be running some more webinars. We also include in our webinar suite, we run a monthly MYOB news channel. So for those who really like to keep up to date with MYOB each month, our news channel is new content, different content every single month. It's delivered live like this session today, but it's also available as a recording. It's a great way where we have a lot of MYOB users attending each month just to keep up to date with the latest happenings and tips and tricks within your software. If you'd like to connect with us, we'd be more than happy to provide you with some information. So if we can help you, we'd love to provide you with some services, either a payroll health check, maybe even an online session to review for you, or maybe you're needing to convert from another solution. So as they say, single touch payroll is just the beginning of the journey. Think about what your next steps are from here. There's some contact details for the AMC team. If you mention that you have attended the Connecting Up session today, we do have a special offer available for you, and there's my contact details there. And if you engage with us for a payroll health check, we also provide a voucher for either a face-to-face training session or an online webinar. I've also provided the Connecting Up email address that's relevant for the MYOB offer if you're wanting to keep in touch. But it's been delightful to present to you today. We saw, there's lots of content, and hopefully you feel a little bit more closer to being ready with single touch payroll. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present to you. I'm sure we've got a few questions if we've got a little bit more time left to go through those, Tina.
Yep, thanks, Pam. We have quite a few questions that have come through, so let's get started. The first one is, if I start with STP partway through this year, will that mean I still need to produce a payment summary for the period not covered by STP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you are reporting, if you want to opt in early, as we encourage you to do, then your year-to-date totals will come through. So if you're paying your staff regularly, those year-to-date totals, even though you may not have done any reporting from July through to May or even June, you could start reporting single touch payroll mid-June, year-to-date totals will come through. You still will, of course, want to just check your totals to make sure that those reports are correct, but absolutely, that's the whole concept of STP, it's year-to-date totals.
Okay, on a similar note, if we upgrade to 19.2 before the end of this financial year, will it interfere with the 18/19 records?
No, it's a nice smooth upgrade. It's not dissimilar to upgrading from version 17 or the earlier version 18 or version 19. It is newer technology, so it might take a little longer for your database to upgrade, but the upgrade process is straightforward, and all your data comes across. It simply is an upgrade if you're moving from Account Right older version to the latest Account Right 2019.2.
Okay, if a staff agreement dictates a higher percentage of superannuation, does that still come under SGC, or do I need to put the amount above 9.5% into a different category?
It's probably getting a bit technical, but yes, in summary, without looking at all the details, generally speaking, if it's over and above the 9.5 or the legislated amount, it's generally considered reportable super, and I would generally set it up as a separate component so it can be reported as risk. But without seeing the details, you might want to seek some advice on that. But if it's a general concept of more than the legislated amount, I would tend to show it as a separate payroll category.
Okay, how does FBT exempt and rebatable get reported?
So I'm not sure if that question was asked before we showed that on the slides. That is reported as part of your finalisation process. In that Payroll Reporting Centre, you'll be able to key in those grossed up values, as you have very similar to what you would have done in the past. In the payment summaries, there'll be the two different sections for reportable FBT.
Okay. I have less than 20 staff, so I will still produce pay summary for FY19. Our first pay run in FY20 will be Friday the 5th of July. Can I assign payroll categories now in preparation for STP, or should I wait until after I've completed the FY19 pay summaries?
Yeah, another great question. So absolutely, I would be doing a lot of this preparation work now. And I would be doing all of those 3 steps I mentioned before, checking your company information, your employee cards, and your payroll categories now. I would just hold off on doing the connection to the ATO, because that's when they'll be expecting to do the reporting. But absolutely, I would. That's why I mentioned before, it's great that you're on board today to carry out those steps in plenty of time.
Okay. Do you only perform connect to ATO function prior to your first payroll using STP, or do you perform this well prior to the first pay run?
I would be doing that connection process. Well, I've heard differing views on this, but we are getting our clients to connect just prior to doing the reporting in July, so that the ATO is not expecting you to do the reporting leading up to 30th of June. So do all those other 3 processes, get ready, and then start your connection process. Does that connect to before your first pay run in July?
Okay. If payroll is run in advance, will STP reporting also be sent in advance?
Yes, you can do your STP reporting in advance. There's no problem with doing that. So that's not a problem. So yes.
Okay. What if I have implemented STP on the 1st of May 2019 and I have closed off an employee record who left the organisation on the 1st of April? Are they being reported?
So there is a process you may need to go through by unterminating them if you've already completed, depending on when they were terminated. For some staff, you'll need to go through and take the termination date out, record a 0 paycheck, and then put the termination date back in again in order for those to go through with the year-to-date totals.
Okay. Are you able to process pay run in advance?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Now, ETP versus lump sum A termination. Not sure what that means. Just has a question mark on the end.
Yeah, that's more a payroll specific question. I'm happy to converse with that offline, but I guess there's some information on the ATO's website if you're not sure about the definition of the different options, or you may like to seek some advice. There's MYOB partners throughout Australia as well, a number of different certified consultants that can help you in your local area, and you also have my contact details there.
Okay. Hi, what ATO reporting category will time in lieu accrued to be allocated to when setting up for STP?
So it's no different to what you would have done in the payment summaries. So if it's it would normally be part of gross earnings, I would imagine, if it's time, if you're being paid for time in lieu.
Okay. If I'm on annual leave, I have previously processed 2 pay runs still paid on the fortnightly dates. How would this work with reporting? Would I be able to report later or need to report earlier?
So generally speaking, the ATO wants you to report each pay event, which is a pay run. So a few of you are asking about timing differences. So just to cover off on, I guess, a number of those questions, if you feel you're not going to be able to report on a regular basis at the pay run event, for example, if you're going overseas for 3 months and you're wanting to do your pays 3 months in advance and queue them all in the bank, then there is the ability inside the ATO portal to actually put in place some ongoing reporting deferrals. So if you are outsourcing payroll, for example, and we've got some clients that we do payroll processing for, and we only get their information once a month, for example, and they pay their staff fortnightly. So on the business portal and also via tax and BAS agents, we're able to go in and put ongoing delays in reporting processes in place. It is something that you'll need to communicate to the ATO, otherwise you will get text messages and various communications from the ATO indicating that your reports are late. That won't start happening initially, but after we're in STP, you'll start getting those communications. So think about if you've got any aspects with your workflow that will hold you up with your reporting, and consider some delays in those reporting timeframes.
Okay, so I'm conscious that we're 10 minutes over time and there's still quite a lot of questions to go through, Pam.
The big topic.
So
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll put a stop to it now and I will export the questions, log out, and send it through to yourself and the MYOB
Sure.
team.
Yep.
And we will answer all these questions offline and send the document out to everybody so that you can have a read through it. And then any other questions that you have that come to mind afterwards, happy for you to send that through to Connecting Up and we can forward that on, or you can send it directly to Pam on the email address that she has on her screen, or the MYB email address also on the screen. So was there anything that you wanted to add, Pam, before we finish off?
I guess really just to reassure the attendees that it is a straightforward process. We've had clients now reporting for 12 months. In fact, in our own organisation, in our own MYB file, we're on the beta testing program and we've been through that process ourselves. So once you get the initial setup done and put the energies and effort into doing that, then the reporting itself is quite straightforward. And MYB have done a great job in making it nice and streamlined. So hopefully it's reassured you today that it's not too daunting, doesn't add too much to your workflow, and it'll all go nice and smoothly for you. But thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today.
Great. Thanks, Pam, for presenting today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from the presentation and that your questions have been answered. If you do have any other questions that come to mind later or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we can answer those questions offline. As I previously stated, you can also contact Pam directly or MYOB via the information on your screen. Don't forget the recording will be available on the website very shortly and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox again. Thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Pam. Thanks, everyone.